Hey guys, welcome to the next tutorial. So in this tutorial we're actually going to get our walking animations and we're going to try to get a sprinting animation in there as well. But either way we're gonna set up the system. As usual, if you have any questions or need any help, just go ahead and join the Discord and we'll do our best. Okay, so what we need to do first is we're going to create another game object within our weapon, which is basically going to take care of all of our animations. I'm just going to right click the weapon and create an empty, and I'm literally just going to call it weapon animations. And then make sure it's all zeroed out with the scale set to 1, and then just click and drag the pump shotgun or whatever weapon you're using, and just make sure it's a child of that new object. So now we have another object that we can edit. And what we're basically going to do to this is attach our animations. So the idling is going to be done by code, but everything else I want to try to do by animation, just because I feel like you can add that nice little extra touch. So I'm going to keep my animations inside this animations folder here. I usually like to organize it just by the weapon that it's on. I'm going to create a folder inside here, and I'm actually just going to call it pump shotgun. And inside here, so this is what you want to do, is you want to create an animator controller for your weapon. So in this case I'm going to call it pump shotgun controller, and then I'm going to click on weapon animations, and I'm going to click and drag that new controller that we just created onto it. Okay, so now that that's created, I'm going to click window and open up animation and then click animation. We're going to go ahead and create a few little clips. So the first clip is going to be the walking, and then we'll do the sprinting. So make sure you got your weapon animation selected and click create. And then it wants you to save the animation before you can start editing it. So I'm just going to put it in the same place we have our controller. And I'm just going to call this walking. And then Unity wants to know kind of what properties you want to animate. So in our case, I'm going to add a property, and I'm going to add our position, add another property, and I'm going to add our rotation. So this is where it starts getting a little bit more creative. We actually need to make the animation now. I'm going to click the little record button, which means any changes we make to the object now, it'll create a nice keyframe for us. So I'm going to go halfway. I'm just going to select both of these properties and click on the little keyframe button to have a keyframe in the middle. I'm going to go halfway in between there and say I'm going to move it a little to the left. I'm going to go halfway in between the other side and move it a little to the right. Just like that, nice and simple. And if I hit play, see we've got a bit of walking going on. So what you can do is, if you want to be really precise, is you can expand these. And when you go to the other side, you can see that I've moved minus 0.17 on the X in this keyframe, and 0.17 in this keyframe, which is actually weirdly perfect. So we're gonna add a few more bits to this just to make it a little bit nicer. So in these keyframes in the middle, I'm going to lift it up a little. I'm going to do the exact same on the other side. Doesn't have to be the same height. We're trying to make it look natural. Otherwise we would have done this by code. So I'm going to hit play and see how that looks now. So see, we're starting to get that momentum, the kind of walking momentum that you expect to see in games nowadays anyway. Okay, and then just in between here, I'm going to go another halfway, and I'm going to add a little bit of rotation. So I'll add a little to the left, maybe push this down a little. Very, very minuscule changes with the rotation. Then maybe a little to the right. Set down a bit again. Just make sure that's in the middle. I'm going to do the same on the other side. A little rotation to the left. Set down a teeny bit. And again. So see, we're just trying to make it look a little bit more natural. So see, now we have more of a natural walk. It doesn't look so static. Okay, so quite happy with that. Obviously we can come and change it a little bit later on. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to use that walking animation. Let's go ahead and create a sprinting animation as well. So I'm going to create a new clip, and we're going to change this to sprinting. and then the same thing, add our two properties in. Okay, and now what we want to do is obviously do a sprinting animation. So the first thing I like to do is hit record this first keyframe. I like to position the weapon to where I want it to be while we're sprinting. So let's just try get a nice little angle. So what I'm going to go for is slightly more realistic, so the weapon like pretty much nearly off the screen, as opposed to Call of Duty where it's like full on the screen. Okay, and I'm going to click the keyframe, click Control C, click near the end and Control V, and then just delete the last keyframe, and then move that to the 1 second mark. So nice and easy, and again we're going to be doing a similar thing. So Control V in the middle as well. Oh, I've lost it. Alright, Control C and then Control V. Okay, and then about halfway we can move that forward a little bit and up a little bit. And then the same here, we can move that back a little bit and up a little bit. Just play around with it a little. Get a bit of a nicer feeling. Okay, and then I'm just going to add, again, just a few little random rotations just to make it seem a little bit more natural. The adding the rotations to make it feel a bit more natural is you do it at the end. It's like the last step. Okay, so again, it might be worth maybe speeding it up a little bit. So we can just move some of these up as this is a sprinting animation. Just obviously adjust it until you're sort of happy with it. That's a little bit quicker. Okay, not the best animation, but for the sake of the tutorial, it'll do. I could actually sit there for hours tinkering, but it's one of the nice things, you know. It's on the screen for a long time, so it's worth making it look. Okay, so now to actually use these animations, I'm going to click on the weapon and I'm going to open up the weapon controller. We'll need to create a reference to the animator. So just below the settings, or actually just above the settings, we'll create a header, and we'll call this references. And below that I'll create a public animator. I'm just going to call that, actually we'll call it weapon animator. Cool. So there's a few things we want to do. We obviously need to be able to trigger this animator depending on what our character is doing. And we also need to be able to set the speed of the character. So it seems quite simple, but if I go into Unity now, let's just quickly allocate that variable. So animator, click and drag, weapon animations inside there. Cool. You can also do find in children, completely up to you how you want to do it. So if I hit play now, it should just start playing the walking animation. So as you can see, it looks a bit weird when the speed isn't synced or anything. But you can see the weapon sway still working, which is what we wanted. Okay, so the main thing now is to get the speed in, so it actually looks like we're walking and not just playing an animation. So to do this, we're going to go over to our character controller. So we're going to be getting the speed from the character. And inside here, I'm going to create another header. Actually, let's not create a header. Let's create a public. We'll call that float, and we'll literally just call it weapon animation speed. Okay. So to get the weapon animation speed, we basically need to find the current speed of the player and then divide it by the speed he's supposed to be, his max speed, and then that way we can work out a percentage on how fast the animation is supposed to be playing. So what I'm going to do is come down into our calculate movement, and we're going to be taking these speed effectors into account, because obviously if we're crouched, we want to do a different check, and if we're prone, we want to do a different check, mainly just because the speed changes. But you see, we don't actually need to put it in each of these because we already have this player settings.speed effector variable. Okay, so we need to set our variable. So our new variable, weapon animation speed. So to get this, we can just say weapon animation speed equals, and then we can get our character controller, and then dot velocity dot magnitude, which will give us a value of how fast the player is moving in any direction. And then what we want to do is we want to divide this by the player settings dot walking forward speed, and then we want to times that. I'm just going to pop that in brackets by the player settings dot speed effector. That way it'll work for crouching and prone. We'll ignore it here. We're going to completely change the animation speeds if we're not grounded. We're not actually going to use the weapon animation speed. So what we can do now is, now that we have that working, we can actually use this variable. But what I also want to do is make sure that the animations don't go too quick. If our player is moving quicker than he's supposed to be, we don't want our weapon animation speed to go to like 1.5 times or 2 times. So I'm just going to do a little check. We'll just say if weapon animation speed is greater than 1, then we will just set it to 1. Okay, it should never drop below 0, so I'm not going to clamp the value. This should be enough. So let's go over to our weapon controller, and we're going to make use of that new variable. So the easiest way to do this, I'm just going to we're going to change this a little bit later on, but we'll do this for now. Just say weapon animator dot speed equals, then we need to access our character controller and that new variable we just made, weapon animation speed. So just like that, fingers crossed, it should just work. Okay, so you can see, obviously we're not moving, so our speed is 0, but if I start walking, you can see it starts to pick up with my speed. Okay, which is perfect. If I walk into something, you can see it stops as well. Okay, so that's purely based off of the player speed, which is kind of what we wanted. If we crouch, we can make sure that that animation still plays over 1 second, which it does. Alright, so that's all nice. And then the next thing to do would be to switch between the animations depending on what the player is doing. So now we've got this set up. This is unfortunately the end of this tutorial, but in the next tutorial we're actually plugging in the sprinting animation, and I'm going to see if we can get the jumping animations done too. So once those are done, it'll start coming to life. And then what we might do after that is have a look at applying a different animation when we're proning, so where we're actually crawling along the ground. But anyway, thank you for watching, and if you need any help, go ahead and join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next one.